Hello, and welcome to the Pro Series Conversations from CheckBox Pro. My name is Missy, and I'm the founder of CheckBox Pro, where we help school leaders become their most efficient and effective selves by matching them with ed-focused executive assistants. Each member of our team has over 10 years of experience in the education sphere, and though we may consider ourselves pros in some areas, we can't be an expert in every area. This is why we are excited to bring folks working in the education space to offer tools, tips, and insights to make the life of a school leader even more sustainable. Today on the podcast, we have the privilege of speaking with one of the foremost authorities in educational finance, Tom Sage. Tom is a partner at Hunt & Andrews Kurth and is the co-lead of the Hunt & Andrews Kurth Public Finance Practice Group. Tom holds a bachelor's from the United States Air Force Academy, master's from the University of Montana, and a doctor of jurisprudence from the University of Houston Law Center. Tom has been instrumental in shaping the landscape of charter school bond financings, particularly in Texas and Arkansas, where he pioneered several innovative financing structures that have had a lasting impact. His expertise extends to working as bond counsel on over $3.2 billion in independent school district bonds over the past 3 years, and he's been a key player in developing unique financing strategies that minimize tax impacts while optimizing resources for schools. Tom's work continues to empower educational institutions with the financial tools and strategies they need to thrive, and we're excited to dive into his insights today on the complexities of charter school facilities and finance. Hi, Tom.
Hi, how are you, Missy?
I'm good. I'm good. It's so glad to have you here. I know you're busy. I think you legit just ran from one meeting to the next. Appreciate you.
It's the life of a lawyer. Although I'm sitting here right now, I'm very self-conscious. I'm not wearing a jacket. So I'm not quite sure how this is all supposed to go, but
it's okay. It's a podcast. So luckily nobody has to see what you look like, which is great because I'm truly just in a little denim overshirt.
There we go. Okay. I didn't know if this was all on video or something. I was like, man, I would have used lots of makeup.
Nope, you look great. Okay, well, before we jump into kind of the nitty-gritty of everything, I was hoping you could just introduce yourself to our listeners, specifically, highlighting your career journey that got you to the unique role that you sit in today.
Sure. Yeah. Again, my name's Tom Sage. I'm a partner here at Hunt & Andrews Kurth. And yeah, like anything meaningful in my life, I kind of discovered it as I went. It was not by plan. Had always been interested in education, came out of law school and was doing municipal bond work for lots of entities, including independent school districts. So I was a school bond lawyer and handled that for a number of years. One of the partners I worked with, a guy named Hank Coleman, who's actually, if it was on video, you could see the furniture in my office. I bought it from him when he retired. Hank Coleman was one of Mike Feinberg and Dave Levin's original board of KIP in Houston, the founding board of KIP ever. Wow. In Houston, Texas. And I was a baby lawyer in his group long before I looked like this. Again, thank God we're not on video. But when I was a young man and a brand new lawyer, I was working for him as well as some other lawyers over there, and they needed some help. And when you're in a large law firm, the place people turn to help are the expendable assets like me, who was brand new and had lots of capacity for work. And so I started helping out on KIP because of that, and had always been interested in education reform. I wrote a master's thesis on it when I was at the University of Montana on some of the issues they'd run into in San Antonio. So it was kind of a latent, if not, it wasn't a cause yet, but an interest and a trying to understand these inequities. And as I started working with them, I did more. And as we did more, KIP started to grow, and we realized we needed more space. And since Hank was a bond lawyer and I was a bond lawyer, you kind of come to a barber, you get a haircut. And so we figured out how to do bond financing and put together the legislation. So we had to go to the Texas legislature to get the laws passed in 99 to pass the laws for charters to do bond financing. And then we did I kind of did the first bond financing with what is now Uplift in Texas, used to be North Hills, when they were in a horse barn, and we financed their deal. We sold all the bonds to American Express, and that was the first bond deal ever, at least in Texas. And we did that one. And like anything else, again, focus on young and an expendable lawyer. If you think about it, most of the bond lawyers in the state had very extensive school district practices. And so they certainly weren't going to risk their livelihood by representing charter schools. But I was. And so we started doing more deals, and we figured out how to do them. Not Hank, I won't talk to him, but there were other partners I worked with that essentially said, look, you're welcome to do that business, but you have to do my work like I'm paying you, so you have to do my work during the day. So I basically built a charter school practice at night, working from my kitchen table and putting deals together. And I did that for years. And for all those years, as luck would have it, I was the only person that cared about it. So I was the only person that did it. And, so you look up 10 years later and you've done 100% of the transactions in Texas and in several other states, just because no one else cared to do it. And the market certainly at that time wasn't big enough. There were a handful of transactions, and they really started picking up around 2006, 7, 8. The deals started getting bigger. They started getting more frequent. We started developing credit quality. We started developing, and we really worked. I can talk about this later, but we really worked towards was creating the concept of a commodity versus a one-off transaction was one of the things I really worked towards. And then then it picked up, then more people got involved, and here we are today. But yeah, I mean, a lot of it was just a labor of love early on. Early on, a lot of these schools didn't have any lawyer except me. So I was not just a bond lawyer, but I was the lawyer. Like I did everything. I mean, everything. I did all the real estate. I did all the policies. I handed off the lawsuits, but yeah, I mean, we handled everything for these schools until a number of other groups of lawyers. I'm sure you've visited with several of them in the state that provide general counsel services for charter schools and school districts.
Yeah.
Stepped in where I could kind of back out and just go back to doing what I really do for a living, which was to finance facilities and advise on weird stuff. So I always tell people what I handle facilities, I handle bonds, I handle financing, and I handle anything weird. We do all the weird stuff for charter schools. I cannot explain to you how weird. Anything politically weird, financially weird, personally weird, structurally weird, governance weird. Anything's weird, we handle.
That's amazing. I was not expecting that. Like
Okay.
I mean, you kind of even mentioned like, how, meandering, but really right out of law school, you kind of found yourself in this space and carved out really important.
It was, yeah, I was into it, and I've never lacked for self-confidence. And so it didn't bother me at all to be a second-year lawyer out there putting deals together.
This was not on my list of questions for you, but that's just how this podcast goes. You mentioned like the fact that there was an inequity, and so there was clearly a need, like charter schools weren't getting that. Why was there an immediate interest for you to go into that space? And I mean, you didn't necessarily at that point have a career to risk, but you needed to establish a career.
Yeah, I mean, it was both. And I think that's, to say otherwise would not be being honest. I think that I was looking for a path I could make for myself as a lawyer within this business that was not already crowded with a bunch of other lawyers. And I started looking at different things. But then the only way that's going to work is to find something that you're passionate about. And I quickly became very interested and passionate about what charters are at their best, what they're trying to accomplish. I think there's a lot. We're 25 years later now. There's been all kinds of stuff, good stuff, bad stuff, everything else, and a lot of people get bogged down in the weeds and mired in the ditches on different things. But at its core, what charters are about are providing underprivileged children with an opportunity, and that's pretty easy to get passionate about.
Yeah.
And I did.
Love that. That's awesome. Well, when I was planning my episodes for the year, I naively thought like I could cover the facilities discussion in like 2 episodes. So I was like, great, I'll talk to a financial advisor and I'll talk to a real estate agent, check, and like move on. And after talking to Drew Masterson and Amy Martirano, like they both independently, right, like reiterated like this need for a team, and like you have to have a team of people who are doing all these different pieces. And so, that's how I got connected to you. And then I've got some other folks hoping, to represent those other pieces of like this facility puzzles. And just when it comes to facilities, like, the closest I can come to understanding the search process would just be your home buying process. And Again, like in that process, you've got a lender and you've got a real estate agent, and you're like, cool, we're covered. And so a lawyer was not involved in my house buying process. And I would say it's probably not the norm for like your average home buyer. But Drew and Amy were very clear, like that a lawyer is essential when trying to secure a school facility. So I think that leads me into my first question for you is why? Like, why is having a lawyer essential when a charter school is looking for a facility? And at what stage in that process should you as counsel be brought in?
Yeah, I think that it's a great question. I'm just trying to think where to start with the answer. I think that first of all, like with our homes, your home, my home, the smallest charter school facility that we deal with, is going to be a $5 to $10 million facility. Pretty customarily. And I don't know where you live, but I certainly don't live in a $5 to $10 million. But what I would also say is that regardless of what you're doing, whether you're in the charter school business, the laundry business, the podcasting business, if you get involved in a $10 million transaction, you better have a lawyer. And it's not just because of the exposure, but as transactions get larger, they get more complex. Buying a house is complicated enough, but in that case, you got one lender, you got insured loans, you got a pretty established mortgage market, real estate agents, everybody kind of knows their thing. And so what you deal with there is you deal with the kind of discrete services, what I think of. So you have a lender, you have a mortgage broker, you have your real estate broker. That's what you have. And then everybody does their thing and you go to the title company, which is a fourth party, and you sign everything up and you get your house, right? Well, in this case, you have multiple interrelated issues. Your real estate bleeds into the finance, which bleeds into the design, which bleeds into the legal structure, which bleeds back into the finance. And what you have is a unified team versus discrete services. So it's a little bit like, I'm trying to think of the right analogy. I don't know if it's like working in like a chef in a kitchen or like a doctor in a hospital, but somewhere in there where you have interrelated disciplines that complement one another, but are also dependent on one another. And so as you go into, for instance, again, and so there's no true chicken and the egg. Everything's a chicken and everything's an egg, and it all has to kind of come at the same time. So that's how the team works together, which is even a very simple thing of like a site selection for a charter school. Okay. Doesn't seem hard. You got to go pick some land. You need 6 acres, go find 6 acres, right? Oh, depending on where that 6 acres is, it will dictate the building design, which dictates the cost. But you may have constraints on cost. So Drew and his team are saying, oh, no, time out. You only have $9 million we can spend. So then you go back to the front and you're like, okay, we can't buy this land. And then you go around here. And so it's a long way of saying that it's a fairly complicated process. It's much more complicated than just a traditional commercial acquisition, not to mention the state law issues, the charter issues with the Texas Education Agency and getting those approvals. And then if all that works and everything kind of lines up and we get the property under contract, then we need to go finance it. And so the financings themselves are very different than your mortgage. So when you go sign a mortgage, you do the same thing with your car. You sign a promissory note. You're going to buy it. Say, hey, I promise to pay you the money back. And here's my house. It's collateral. Here's my car. It's collateral. Right? That's the deal.
Yep.
Well, in these, what you're creating and what we were successful in creating is what's called it's a revenue financing system. So you're able to capture and capitalize the revenue of the enterprise that is the charter school. So that is the Tom Sage Charter School starts up, and what we're able to do this is we're able to aggregate all the revenues from all the campuses to support a central financing system and access capital, access money for our projects with that system. And in doing so, it's harder than buying a house. It's very carefully crafted, and it also bleeds into the governance, the structure of the organization. And then on top of that, a lot of the debt that we access in the tax-exempt bond markets. And so tax-exempt bonds are yet another layer of complexity where you have federal income tax law that comes to bear on the transaction and on the client and on the project and on everything. You have securities laws because we're doing securities offerings in the market. So it's just like doing like an IPO or like you talk about people issuing stock or bonds in the market. You can go buy Apple stock or Apple bonds. Same thing for most of the charter schools in Texas. You can buy their debt on the public markets. And in order to do so, you have to comply with the securities laws of the United States. And then not to mention the state process of getting bonds taken care of. So it's a lot. I mean, I think, I would argue, I was trying to think whether I could call myself and call the lawyers the glue in the deal, but I don't think that's true. I think everybody is. It really is. I think you can't, I don't say like the underwriter, the financial advisor, and the lawyer. You could probably add more legs, but there's certainly 3 legs to a stool, and it's not going to work without one. It's just not going to work. And we all like to rely on each other to do our jobs and to do our jobs well to make the thing work. Because you don't want me. I mean, for lawyers, I'm pretty good at math, but I'm not like a financial advisor like Drew or those guys. Those guys are freaking crazy math people. I mean, it's incredibly impressive what they can do. But I'm a word person, so I can do words, and I do words better than they do. So everybody kind of brings their strengths to the team, like any other successful team. And the other thing we've been really good at in Texas, sorry, this is a super long answer. The other thing we've been really good at in Texas, and we've done it mostly nicely, is we've really curated a group of professionals in Texas that are really, really solid professionals. I mean, there are other bond lawyers other than me, but I think we've all collectively worked to make sure that everybody does a good job for clients. And we certainly compete and we do things like that. But the players that are in the game are all legitimate players. And I would say that for the bankers as well, for the underwriters. We've had some people come into Texas and not behave honorably, and they're no longer doing business in Texas.
I'm not in Texas. Oh no.
No, we do not do that.
We do not do that.
You go to some other states, and I'm not picking on other states, but there's some other states. I've been out there and I'm like, what is going on? Like, this is not okay. Like, we can't, no. Yeah.
Well, you're just reiterating again, like what Drew and Amy said, right? Is like you have like trust is so key because again, one, it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money for anyone, but it's certainly a lot of money for school leaders and charter organizations who need to be good stewards of their funds, right? It's like federal funds who are given to them. It's tax dollars. It's philanthropic dollars. Like, so with that in mind, like thinking about, if I'm a new charter school leader looking to open, need to find a lawyer that I can trust, like, what are the qualities and or experience that, these leaders should be looking for when hiring? And maybe then what are some red flags, in that same vein?
Well, the first thing you need to look for is whether their name is Tom Sage.
Okay, for our listeners who are outside
you just do that, then you're fine. But no, I mean, you want to look at, certainly meet them. Okay, so I try to tell people, I even tell clients, like, being a lawyer is a position of trust. And if you don't trust your lawyer, it's not going to work out. So you could be the finest lawyer in America, but if the client doesn't trust you, they're not going to share with you the things they need to share with you, and they're not going to let you help them. And so you need to meet them. I tell my young lawyers, I've even told my kids this before, like, and I'll ask you, I said, you can't get religious on me because that's cheating on the riddle. But have you ever trusted someone that you never met? Tell me the name of someone you trust but you've never met. Most people can. You need to meet your lawyer in order to trust them. They need to meet you, because the other thing is you got to realize that your lawyer needs to trust you. And that's things that people don't actually realize, that if you are my client, you tell me something, I'm going to believe you. And we're going to build up a trust relationship. So that's the first place you start, is establishing a position of trust and finding someone you feel comfortable trusting. And it's not that hard. I mean, we meet people every day, and some people give you the heebie-jeebies and some people you like and trust. And you hope they're no con artists. And again, I think in Texas, we've done a good job. We don't really have any kind of slippery people doing this business in Texas right now, at least not that I'm aware of. So you're in good shape there. And then also ask other charter leaders. I think that speaks volumes. I think that all of the lawyers in this area will stand on their reputations, and like anything else, there's people who like people and people who don't, people who think people are too expensive, people who think they aren't. I mean, there's different thoughts on different folks, but I would do those two things. When in doubt, you could also go to the association. The Texas Public Charter Schools Association, knows everybody in the business and can probably give you a good recommendation and or warn you off of somebody if you want. But I think those are usually the best ways to check it. As big as the Texas charter school market has become, it's still a very small community. You know, you go to these conferences, it's the same folks. You see a lot of the same people doing the same things, and people know who you are, and that works both ways. So you better be treating people right, or everybody's going to know you're not.
That is true. It is a very small community.
I mean, it's one of the largest charter communities in the country. Still very small.
It's still very small. Yeah. I mean, I think I could probably guess the answer, but I want to just hear from you. I mean, have you seen any charter school leaders who, because you kind of brought up expense, right? Which, might be kind of something we can talk about here in a second,
Sure.
of just like legal costs, and budgeting for that. But I would imagine, because I'm very frugal, I'm like going to try to find a way to like cut some costs. And it's like, oh, maybe I can't do Tom Sage because he's pricey because he's an expert in the field, but I'll just go this general real estate lawyer who doesn't have like the ed experience and doesn't have the clout that Tom Sage does. Can I get away with that? Or am I going to just truly end up spending more because now it's going to take longer?
I have a couple ways of kind of answering that. I mean, when you're dealing with the financing system and the facilities of a charter, I mean, think about it, charters have academics, they've got finances, they got their facilities, and they have personnel. You got four big components. So this is two of them.
Yeah.
I want you to think of it like if you were going in to get like heart surgery or major surgery, right? I'll pick the organ. Do you want somebody that's kind of does it part-time? I mean, you go ahead. I mean, he's a doctor and I'm sure he means well and he's not out to hurt you, but does he do it every day? And has he done thousands of these? And is he, an expert in this area and is thinking of new innovative solutions every day for the problem you have? Or is he a guy that, seems competent, ought to do a good job and be a lot cheaper? So, I mean, that's one way I think of it. And I don't think that's incorrect. I really don't. I mean, I think that these are, when I get involved with a transaction that has been screwed up and we come in and start unwinding it, it is terribly expensive and terribly time consuming to get it unwound and rewound and done correctly. That is not to say that we're the only people who can, but, I mean, there's a couple of old things, there was the old Reddit Air thing. Is like, if you think a professional's expensive, then go hire an amateur and see how much that costs. I mean, that's one of the ones. He was the guy that put out the oil field fires. Then there was, the other concept is, and I'm always very straight up about it. I mean, what we do and the types of financings and services we provide for clients, this is not a discount service. It just isn't. I mean, this isn't Walmart. I mean, I'm not mad at it, that's not what we're doing here. But on the other hand, it's fair. And by fair, I mean that if you are a brand new charter school, your transaction will cost what we charge clients who we've represented for 20 years. We know what it costs to do this. And we don't have those long-standing relationships because we've taken advantage of people. And it's just an expensive service. They're expensive deals. And we work on getting it down to the, deal level. I mean, clearly a big, bond offering is probably the multi-campus bond offering is the top of expense, but there's a spectrum. We go all the way down to just a basic purchase of real estate, which is not particularly expensive.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's a very lawyery answer.
Rental, I know a lot of new starter schools do, they
a lot
rent first.
A lot of times general counsel will handle those. I mean,
Okay.
There's things where I'm like, I'll even tell clients, I was like, look, this, y'all can do this without me. Like, you don't need us to do this. This is not something you need, this level of expense on. So a lot of times general counsel handle those. To the extent we work with them on those, I mean, the one thing I always tell people, I'll tell it in speeches at conferences and everything else, is when a new charter gets into their facility, the most important thing they can have is a purchase option. If you do nothing else, if nobody remembers anything else from this podcast, if they're a new charter and they get into a rental facility, make sure they have a purchase option. Because what happens, I've seen it happen time and time and time again, that we get the Missy Couch charter school starts up, and of course it's successful, and they rent some space, kids start coming, and then parents start lining up to send their kids there, and then all of a sudden, so this 4 or 5 years in, you're like, you know what, this is it, this is going to be our home, this is the home, this is the headquarters of Missy Couch Charter School, and we're going to be here. Let's go buy this building. And you walk into that landlord's office and he's just rubbing his hands together. Like, you want to buy it now. And oh, if you move, you have to relocate 500 families. And oh, you're going to have to find a whole new home base and a whole new feeder pattern and a whole new stuff. And the price goes up. So the one thing I always tell people is, and when you're at the beginning and when you're at the kind of the true genesis of that relationship with the landlord, to the extent they will agree to a purchase price, negotiate a purchase price. Because then when you look up 4 or 5 years later, you can come in and pay it and buy your building.
Would not have even, yeah.
It is the most frustrating thing because if you come in there, and I've done it. So the Mississippi Council Charter School decides this is what we're buying. We're buying it. I don't care how much it costs, we're buying it. You're like, okay, I hope you don't care how much this costs, because they're going to wear us out. And I have successfully, and the frustrating ones, unsuccessfully negotiated the purchase of many, many buildings. And sometimes it's just what you want, and that's what we got to pay. And it is very unpleasant.
That sounds so stressful.
That's why, again, we're not on camera. That's why you look like you look, and that's why I look like this.
We're the same age.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, people are always telling me like I'm timeless. I'm like, yeah, because I've looked like this since I was 35.
Yeah. Yeah, they'll age it quick. And then you mentioned you had kids, so that's just another layer.
Yeah, no, we've done that. So yeah.
Okay, so thinking, you kind of touched on it, like the idea of like protecting a school's interest, and that's one way, right? Is like making sure that that contract has a purchase agreement. I wouldn't know to even ask for that necessarily. These leaders are so, whatever's right in front of their nose. It's hard to be strategic, especially in those early years, because I've got to get, transportation scheduled, and I've got to make sure internet's turned on, and I've got to get kids in the building, and I have to hire staff, right? Like, so very short-sighted in those early days. And so I think you make a great point of like, you need to have somebody in this team, right, who their sole focus is to be farsighted for you. Like,
Right.
I know you just want to get your doors opened in August, but you're also hoping for your school to exist beyond this school year. And so what do we need to do to set you up for success in that way? Maybe I'm thinking about like protecting a school's, best interest. Do you have an example? I always love like juicy things, right? Like, do you have an example of a facility deal that's gone wrong due to like this lack of legal oversight? You kind of mentioned you've maybe had to unravel some things, and maybe specifically what would have prevented that from happening had they had good legal counsel or legal counsel at all. Maybe they thought, I can do this myself. I can read a contract.
Yeah. Let me think. I need to be able to answer this without divulging any clients.
Oh, that's true.
That is also challenging. So what I will say is, early on, so I can tell you these early, probably 10-ish years ago, we've mostly weeded a lot of these folks out. There were some very, very predatory charter school developers that were out there. So developers who would come in and build your building for you and lease it to you, right? And again, you've got brand new school leaders who get involved. They need a building. This person just says, sign here, 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 here. We'll build you the building. Tell us what you want. We'll go build it. And when you show up, you just start paying us rent payments in a year. You'll have a building. You'll have a brand new building. So you can recruit students. You'll have all this magic. You're not going to be renting a church. You're not going to be renting an old laundromat. You have a brand new school building with your name plastered across the front of it. And this is going to be awesome. And they did not consult counsel. They treated it just like buying a car, just like renting a car, just like anything else, any other transaction in their life. And no lawyer was involved in this. No lawyer on their side was involved in this. And you get into those deals and they were terrible to unwind, because number one, like, you got a valid contract. I mean, the developer, while he was kind of a scumbag, has a real contract that you really can't avoid. And you really signed it. And he didn't have to make sure you had a lawyer. That was your problem. And so you'd run into things with like, for instance, like rent escalators. That was a huge one we had to fight back on and get out of, where your rent went up every year. And so you have a charter school that's trying to grow, trying to build capital so it can buy its building. Well, the financials, it's like chasing after a running target. Right.
Yeah.
Every year it gets higher and higher, higher, higher. And so you can never get there. We had others that had terrible purchase premiums. Others did terrible construction. So the developer not only provided the financing, but they also went out and built the building for you. And we've had lawsuits on those. We've had to rebuild buildings. We've actually had to pay the developer out and just actually pay the developer the money that is in the document that for somebody that you really, really don't like, who really, really abused you, and you give them millions of dollars. You want to walk away from a closing and feel sick to your stomach, do that. So those are those are the best ones I could talk to for, especially for startups. And again, I go back to what I said at the very beginning. This very smallest transactions they're involved with are multi-million-dollar transactions.
Yeah.
And to think you're going to go do a multi-million-dollar transaction without some lawyer, it doesn't have to be me, but get a lawyer. Get somebody that can help you, somebody can look out for your interests, somebody that'll read the documents, they'll understand what you're getting into. And if that's the deal you can get, the other thing, and I'll say, look on the other side, when charter schools are starting out, they're not going to get the best deal in the world. It's a very high risk time for an organization. And so they're going to get money and services from people who are going into a risky situation or expecting a higher return. And that's fair. Okay. But there shouldn't be a penalty or just an ongoing punitive aspects of that transaction going forward. And those are the things you look out for. And those are things a lawyer looks out for. So if today you got to go borrow some money, you're a brand new charter school, and I'm going to make up rates. Drew would pass out if I did this without but you're going to go do this and somebody says, okay, I'll loan you the money. It's going to be 8%. And that's the best money you can get. Well, then it's 8%. I mean, just because the school down the street who's been around for 20 years is borrowing at 5%, that doesn't mean you're getting a bad deal. It just means that's where your credit is. That's where your risk profile puts you. And so that's fair. And also you go back to having somebody experienced. We went back to the brain surgeon. Well, that person needs to know if it's fair. Like, I'm not a financial advisor, but I see enough of these deals to know whether or not you're getting abused. Like, you're just like, no, that's just not right. Like, we need to talk to the bankers, but that just does not seem right. And we've had deals. There was a charter with one of these developers. This was 15 years ago, maybe after the 2008, but before PSF came in. We got to the night of the deal and we walked the closing. We walked it because they changed the terms on us 2 days before closing. And we had to walk the whole thing. It was a mess. But I mean, those are the types of things. But in that case, they had a lawyer. In that case, we were able to see it and advise the client and explain to them what's going on and give them, alternatives and figure out what we're going to do. And then we were able to walk the deal rather than just feeling like we're this far down the road and we have to do it. And there's no lawyer sitting there telling you, or there's no lawyer to catch the problem. Because this was sneaky. I mean, there are people who do sneaky and real sharky things out there, and you gotta be paying attention. And so anyway, I'm looping back to why you need a lawyer, but what I'm trying to say is those are the types when people proceed without counsel and they're going into an area. I'm trying to think, like, it'd be if I decided tomorrow to go fly a hot air balloon. Okay. Hey, what do you mean? If you blow the fire thing into it and let the rope go and should be fine, right? I mean, what the heck? It's only a few parts. I mean, how hard can this be? I mean, but I know nothing, zero about flying a hot air balloon. And when people get into these, their new charter school leaders are forced to do things that they don't know how to do. And some of that's exciting as an entrepreneur, and it's kind of part of the spirit of doing it. Think of that. Like, think of how many bad things would happen if Tom Sage went downstairs and climbed into a hot air balloon and took off.
Well, like, come back.
I mean, how do you get down? Where do you land? Where's the wind blowing me? How do I steer this thing? Like, I don't know. But that's what people end up with when they don't have competent counsel, or they don't have any counsel, is they're out there in a hot air balloon just adrift and hoping they land someplace safe.
Why y'all make y'all's language so hard?
Funny thing, lawyers used to get, way back when, lawyers used to get paid by the word.
Stop.
True story. True story. Before, like 100 years ago, before lawyers started billing time, they billed by the word. True story.
Well, that makes sense.
That's why legal documents are long.
That's amazing. Okay, so you mentioned, I'm just trying to think like, okay, I've got a listener.
Yep.
We're wrapping up our time. I just want to make sure that I want them to walk away. You've made it crystal clear. I'm gonna tout that everybody needs a lawyer. I'm almost like for every transaction, for anything. But yeah, for the newbie who just likes to, I want to review my own contracts still with counsel, but like outside of, okay, making sure a rental agreement has a purchase option, and making sure you're not getting abused with your rate or whatever sort of secret, like hidden things. What are other maybe common things that, yeah, you hope there aren't seedy people out there, but what are some common things that are getting thrown into contracts that are like a big no-no, like this should not live in your contract at all?
Yeah, things like that. In your leases, escalators, in construction arrangements or developer arrangements, big premiums. You want to kind of look through the deal to figure out what the counterparty's kind of internal rate of return is. And a lot of times it gets disaggregated into lots of different components, and you can kind of figure out, okay, actually, this is actually costing me a lot more than it would be just to go borrow some money from a bank. But again, I think that if they have a good team, and again, I can't emphasize that enough. I'm not trying to make, I used to work with a banker, and he used to say, look, I'm not trying to tell you how to build a watch. I just want to tell you what time it is. A charter school leader doesn't need to learn how to build a watch. They need to find professionals and find people who can help them. And that can be done on a very reasonable basis. The way these things work out, I've never seen somebody go out of business paying their professionals, but I've seen people go out of business not paying attention. Like, I'm not kidding you. There are many charters that I have had to help close and find buyers for because they weren't paying attention. But on the other hand, those are the things to think about. There's a lot of push for new charters to get out there and do kind of big splashy things, and understand that comes at a lot of risk. And there's some that get through that and some that don't. Understand that you're going to start small and you're going to grow, and you will. Focus on the things you know how to do. Focus on providing quality education. Focus on taking care of your kids, and let lawyers and bankers take care of you. Those are the things you usually see early on. Again, it can be very frustrating, and I'll honestly say the most frustrating thing for me are clients that keep us at arm's length. I'm not trying to rack up legal bills. We don't, just the way we work. I won't get into how billing works, but that's not an issue with us. But it's the more we know, the more we can help, and the more we can help you avoid. And so keep your team informed and close. They're there to help. Like, let them help you, and also make sure they understand what you want. Our goal is to help, again, the Missy Couch Charter School. If you want to take over the world, then I'm going to set you up to take over the world. If you want to run one early childhood center in South Austin, and that's what your goal is for your organization, we'll help you with that. Your professionals should be agnostic as to their own goals. They're supposed to subordinate their goals to yours and help you achieve them. And we can't do that if you don't tell us. And that's usually one of the initial conversations I'll have with the client. It's like, okay, like what do you want to, what's your goal? What do you want to do? And we go from there, because that's what guides us. And what other things? Be careful who's on your board. Be careful who's on your board. I've seen things go sideways there. You have a founder, you have a board. The board has governance and control of the organization. I can give you all the legal stuff, but but there's a founder that's there that started it and is expending his or her blood, sweat, and tears getting this thing going. And you get a board that decides, well, this is my school. I don't think we need you anymore. That happens. That really does happen. I've seen it happen many times. That can get, so be careful with your board about it.
Oh gosh, I don't want to end on a bummer, Tom.
Oh, let's find a good positive. Let's find a good positive.
And thinking about that, you kind of mentioned it.
You were asking me things to look out for. I can't tell you to look out for rainbows and unicorns.
Okay, let's think about this. All right. Charters have a mission, right? They have a vision, they have unique needs. What is legal counsel's role? I think you sort of hinted at, right? Like representing, ensuring that their legal agreements. Do I want to ask this question?
Let's think
Tom?
something more positive than legal stuff.
Yeah, let's do more positive. I think, well, okay. More positive than
I
legal
do all
stuff. But
kinds
I
of
have
other
a, I have
I
an
do the
attorney in front
policy
of me.
stuff. I do the policy stuff. I do the political stuff. I do everything. So what do you want to talk about? Let's talk about something fun.
Well, what's okay? You tell me what's fun. What's fun
What's
in this?
fun? What's fun? What's fun is actually watching it work,
Yeah.
right? I mean, what's fun is seeing, the incubation and the growth of a truly independent and complementary educational system in Texas and across the United States that all of the people we deal with and that you deal with are part of. And university, actually, the best I can tell you is like my wife came to, we had a reception at the charter school conference, and my wife came, which is great. She had a nice time. But that's not really the important part. But what she told me afterwards, she's like, everybody's so nice. Everybody's just so nice, everything. And I was like, you know what? You have a room full of people who have dedicated their lives to helping underprivileged children. Of course they're nice. Like, this community is some of the most wonderful people I've ever had a privilege to work with. And they're accomplishing incredible things for children that, 20 years ago would have been lost. And I think that people need to never forget that that's what we're a part of, and that's what we're doing. And all of us that do this, we all make a living and we all do our things, and we're all closing deals, and we're all taking care of the clients. But you look out there, there's hundreds of thousands, soon to be millions of children that had opportunities because of what we've all worked on. And it's really wonderful. I mean, it's my life's work. It's something I love and I'm proud of and brag to people about, and not just brag about me, but brag about what my clients are doing and what they're doing with kids. I mean, I just do the lawyering, man, but they're turning people's lives around. It's amazing.
That's a great note to end on. It's a good reorienting back to why we do this work, and that, yeah, reading another contract or me like scheduling another meeting for, for a client, and realizing that it's freeing. Ultimately, my company is here to create sustainability for school leaders. And that might not be the mission of y'all's, y'all firm, but it's what it's doing, right? Like that is time that leader is able to go observe more classrooms, or go develop their teachers, or go, just a myriad of other things that are more directly related to their area of expertise. And so, yeah, it's been nice to remember that
it's spectacular.
we get a front row seat. Yeah.
Makes me happy every day.
I love that.
I'm not kidding.
I believe
Like,
it.
I'm annoyingly happy every day.
People told me that. People told me that when they said you need to talk to Tom. Okay, Tom, well, I ask one final question of all of my guests,
Sure.
and it is in the spirit of my company's name, CheckBox Pro. What is one box, big or small, personal or professional, that you hope to check off today?
Wow, I should have been prepared for that one. I guess just check off the box with new school leaders to let them know they're not alone. They're not alone in this process. There are 200 other charters in the state who have started up and have been right where they were in this exact same seats they were in. There are professionals and an entire ecosystem that has been developed to help them do what they need to do. Now, it's not free, but it's there to help them. And they don't have to feel like they're all alone and that they're doing this alone. And it's something that I've worked on at different times to try to provide different avenues for people to get together and share their thoughts, because charters oftentimes feel like they're all by themselves in the wilderness. They really do. They got everybody against them. The ISDs hate them. This people are upset. The this, the that, and they just feel like it's them against the world. So I would say I just check the box that they don't feel alone.
That's great. That's great. It can be very lonely. You're right. But you're right. They're not. Tom, thank you so much for being with
Hey, happy to. Thank you for this. This was fun. I don't ever get to talk about what I do.
I feel like we could probably have multiple episodes about just
Man,
all
be careful what you wish for.
Tom Sage, round 2, coming back. Awesome. Well, thank you all to our listeners. Definitely lots of nuggets of wisdom in here, but first and foremost, like, make sure that you find a lawyer that you can trust. Sit down with them, And I loved that. Just make sure you're communicating your goal to your lawyer because they are in your corner to make sure that that comes to fruition. So thank you all, and we will see you next time. Thank you all for listening to today's Pro Series conversation. Our team is always looking for more pros to learn from in the field of education. So if you have a recommendation for a future guest, or maybe you are the pro, then send us a note at info@checkboxpro.com. And if you want to hear from more pros, then like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so that you don't miss an episode. And by doing so, this also helps more folks find our show. So take a moment to check that box off your list today.